Hello and welcome to the second episode of the seminar series that I'm doing on Chopin's first Ballade. I recorded the first segment to this last week, which I'll link into the description below, and also I'll put my recording of the piece which I recorded about 2 weeks ago. So if you haven't done so already, please take a look at these other videos that I've created, as that will give kind of a bit of background and insight into why I'm creating these and what I've already talked about and discussed up until what we get to today, which is from bar 45 of the Chopin first Ballade. So on the first episode we talked a little bit about the Agitato, not to rush that too much or to accelerando through there, because I think it kind of just destroys the mood. So it's okay maybe from bar 43, halfway bar 43 to bar 44, to kind of give it a bit of lift before you get into the sempre più mosso, and then you can kind of in there then for the next section. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. So the sempre più mosso, we've got a performance direction here. So sempre means just basically to keep it consistent, or throughout is what the translation is. So whenever you get a sempre in any piece, just make sure that it's kind of consistently. So if it's sempre pianissimo, then it's consistently pianissimo, you know, or sempre forte, then it's consistently loud. So in this case we've got sempre più mosso, so you're just going to keep it consistently, and più means more, and then mosso just means fast or kind of more animated. So that's kind of like the descriptive terms surrounding there. So consistently a little faster basically. So by the time you get into bar 44, we're kind of on this section where we are ready to get into like the main bulk of the section starting at 45. So if we just preface that with a little bit of context. So that section there, obviously it's gotten very loud and very serious quite fast. So we're just going to take it from here. So in bar 45, we have an accent on this A of the left hand here. So we just need to make sure that that comes out throughout the kind of right hand, which has got this kind of flourish over the top. So this just needs to pierce through and then... So one of the things that I often hear within performances, and of course this section is so fast it's easy to kind of miss details out, but it's kind of the phrasing as well in the left hand at this section. So we've got this, so the G, the G which succeeds the D, obviously is part of like a new phrase. It's not part of the phrase that's just happened. So we have this, that's the end of the phrase, and then we're back in on the G. So that's something to consider when practicing it. Obviously, as we go through the next couple of bars here, the phrases are more obvious because they've got phrase marks over them. So when we get to this peak in the forte in bar 48, we have this underneath in the left hand. Now this shouldn't be kind of overshadowed by the right hand, because although the right hand's got some meaning to it, for me it's kind of just more of a flourish. It's kind of the icing on the cake, whereas this underneath is where the meat is. So if you can keep that consistent and really bring that out when you play that, that would be more beneficial. So the right hand obviously is doing this. That over the top, which is obviously very decorative, and it's a major part of the piece obviously, but the left hand which comes underneath that obviously needs to be brought out more. And when you practice this, practice it so the phrasing is exact, so you don't just play it all as if it's just one kind of massive mirage of notes. Practice it slowly and practice it so the left hand phrasing particularly comes out. So let's just give that one quick go. So at this section, the left hand really is divided into these end kind of phrase, then it picks up the next phrase here. End of the phrase, and then the next phrase. End of phrase, and then the next phrase. And then another phrase. So this is kind of moving the phrasing around a little bit. So on bar 50 we had this. And it ended there, but on this time, in bar 51, G, instead of being the end of the phrase, is now the beginning of the new phrase. Okay, and then we have these interjectory components in the left hand, which is kind of giving these. And it's kind of slurring these notes across, so the C sharp to the D, the G to the D, C sharp to the D again, and then C to G, C to G. We have this kind of back and forth in the left hand there. So just make sure that these are slurred across, so you can put your fourth finger on the C sharp to the fifth finger on the D in the left hand. And then slurring again. Obviously you can't reach because you've got the G to the D there and it's so fast you can't really change fingering. So just give this a bit more weight and then come off on the D to give an illusion that you're kind of slurring across. Then still in bar 53, you can slur that because it's just chromatic, two notes that are next to each other, semitone apart. So we've got this chromaticism. And then swing between the C to the G to give it a bit of instability, if you like, harmonically. Okay, and then the right hand in this section, obviously it's full on, it's obviously very technically difficult. So what we need to do is just practice it really slowly with a metronome and dividing it up so you can do rhythm exercises on it. So in this case, things are kind of almost divided in threes, so kind of you've got a triplet feel there. So what we should do is just divide it. So you've got, well, let's demonstrate this. So for instance, if we take the first set of triplets in bar 48, just this. Okay, so these exercises, and I'll probably do a different video specifically on the technique of how to practice this, but just to briefly cover it, what we're going to do is take these three notes and subdivide them into three different segments. So first of all, we're going to divide it like that. So, and then we're going to go, and again. And the third one is just the whole set of three. So, okay, and then you can do that for the next one. And. So you have these three triplet notes, and we're going to subdivide them so you can kind of practice them differently. So if I just give an example of in context of maybe just the first three bars or so. So okay, so you've got the first exercise there. Then the second exercise is very similar, just shifting the semiquaver to the end. So you're going to go, or to the first. So you're just shifting the semiquaver to the first two notes and leaving space in between the second and the third quaver triplet. So. Okay, and then the third exercise is just a full set of three. Probably these are going to be kind of all semiquavers, and you're leaving a semiquaver rest at the end. So, okay, so that's the idea. So you can practice it like that, which will just give you more control over the right hand when you put in both hands together. Okay, so then we move on to bar 53 to 54, and we have this kind of part which can kind of get a little bit muddy. So this section here, just make sure that the right hand is clear, so making frequent pedal changes, and the left hand also make sure that that comes out through the problems I had with when I was recording it, and I made a couple of taster recordings, if you like, is that the left hand I never really brought that out enough. So just make sure that there's enough power behind the left hand, because the left hand really is the driving force in this piece, at least at this section, because this is kind of where everything anchors, and the kind of drama and the weight and the aggression, if you can call it that, the seriousness behind it is underpinned by the bass. So just make sure that those slurs in the bass really come through, even though the right hand can give the illusion of being muddy, but with enough pedal changes, that should clear that up. So on bar 56, we have these, and the arpeggios in the right hand release the energy, if you like, the tension that's just occurred from the sempre più mosso. So when you get up to this section, make sure the right hand obviously sings as it naturally will, because you've got this in the right hand, which is it's just going to kind of flourish anyway. But make sure the left hand, because the left hand kind of shadows this, so make sure this underpins it as well and kind of aids the right hand, because obviously you've not got much meat within the core of the piano, this section of the piano here. So just make sure that the left hand secures that you've got enough grit behind it to go with. So as we come out of that, we've got a collando. So collando obviously is a decrease in speed or volume, or both. It's kind of like the calm after the storm, or the calm before the storm. So just make sure that this really from bar 60, I mean it's written over bar 63, but I tend to do it a little bit before, because the energy of which this section involves, it's kind of a couple of bars I personally think isn't enough to come off on. So if we just take it from bar maybe 56, 57, 58 just into that, and then we'll take it a little bit further into the next section. Okay, so we have a section here where we're obviously collando, and then directly after that, in the next bar, the smorzando, which is basically an indication to kind of die away. So we've had this really energetic upheaval in the preceding bars, and now it's asking us to die away to this F at the top. So this, and then we're left open. We have an open harmony, right? Because there's no third in there. We just it's just F and C. Cool. We're open to what the next chapter is supposed to be, which is this now minimosso. And then after the smorzando, we have this written, which we all know is just to slow down, written. So just before we carry on, we have a melody in the left hand also. So instead of it just being this, there's these kind of bass notes all the time. By the time we get to bar 63, really bring out this G natural to the A, because that's a melodic feature. Okay, so the right hand's got these arpeggios, which is just making massive flourishes in the waves of the harmonic structure, but this right hand underneath is melodic. So, and then back to the accompaniment roll of that open harmony in the left hand. Okay. And now from this section, make a long pedal, create a really long pedal which will aid this section into the minimosso. So for instance, so you've got a kind of open harmony here. So you're just creating this atmospheric, where are we going to go? It's kind of improvisatory, as Chopin was famous for, really, being an improviser. So we have this written, and just make sure this is written all the way to the minimosso. So even these crotchet C and Fs are still in written, so, and then break from that and you're into the new section. So we've got sotto voce, which means under the voice. So you're going to play this half voice. So it may be useful to put the unicorda pedal down. So this left pedal on the piano, keep that down because you want it to be really under the voice, as if someone's kind of whispering like that or keeping a very low tone. And in the right hand, obviously, you've got these voices as well. So you got two voices in the right hand. Right, so just practice making sure that these really come through too. These fourths, okay? It's obviously a new section, so just make sure that it's more graceful than it was before. So if we just give that a go. So one of the things that I would do is make sure that the phrasing in the right hand particularly is executed well, obviously with as well as the left hand, but because the right hand has the melody, it's particularly important to get this correct. So you have this in the right hand, then your new phrase starts here, so you need to phrase there, then the new phrase, then the new phrase, then the new phrase, then the new phrase, then you end of the old phrase and the beginning of the new, because there's an end of the phrase mark on this and the beginning of the new phrase mark on this too. So then new phrase, new phrase. Okay, so Chopin plays around with the phrasing a lot. It's not exactly obvious where it would be as, for instance, Mozart, where you can almost guess where it's going to be. It's intrinsic within the music. And I'm not saying that this isn't intrinsic. I'm just saying that the phrasing isn't necessarily every 4 or 8 bars. There's phrasing within half bars to the next half bar, the beginning of the bar to the end of the bar, the end of the bar to the middle of 2 bars later. So just make sure that the phrasing is, as it should be. The left hand more or less is phrased every bar. So new phrase, new phrase, new phrase, new phrase, new phrase, and then towards the end of that passage you have phrase marks on every half bar, which is what you'd expect because that's where the harmonic changes are anyway. So okay, cool. So all of this together, just make sure that everything is phrased beautifully, because this really is a place where phrasing does take a lot of prominence and importance. Throughout the section, really, it's in pianissimo, and if you watch the first segment of the seminar series, you'll know that we can have different levels of pianissimo. It doesn't have to just be really quiet, So there are places where you can take the unicorda off, as long as it's kind of still under the voice, sotto voce. Okay, so once you've done that, just make sure as well on this section that the accents are in place. So make sure, for instance, in bar 72 at the beginning of that, that you accent towards the B flat and then come off on the A flat. So you've got this rise and fall again like we described in episode 1. So it's again just a masterpiece of tension and release, harmonic tension and release as well as melodic tension and release. So in bar 71, for instance, if we just quickly play that. So I played that slowly, but you can see that the B flat takes the prominence and then falls onto the A flat, and the F sharp takes the prominence before it falls onto the G. So you have this rising and falling, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the note has to be above the note that it's falling to, or it has to be after the note that it's falling to. That's incumbent within the phrasing. So you have this, which is after, but you also have right, yeah, so you have this falling to the note after and then falling to the note underneath, which is really interesting as well, because you'd expect it to fall underneath. The definition of fall is to go below, isn't it? But you can really fall above as well. So just make sure that the accents are placed well. This. Accent onto the new section at bar 82. Okay, so at bar 82 we have this, what I've written as a conversation between two people. And this is particularly difficult because the left hand has this passage. And it's really difficult to make the left hand not be clumpy. So, it's got to be very subtle here, very under the surface. And there can't be any false accents in it as well, which is so difficult to do. Yeah, and then the right hand. And really fall to those B flats, yeah? You have this counter melody. And what I do on mine as well is on this counter melody, I do this D flat, C flat. And I sustain the B flat in the left hand as well, which isn't written, but I think it kind of complements the music, which I kind of shouldn't do, but I don't apologise for either. So, okay, you have a repeat, so you have to play it differently. So, piano, ping. Yeah, you have this pinging in the, but it's just less the second time. And as well, make sure that the rhythm here is correct, because when it comes, for instance, in bar 82, the rhythm, it does change a little bit. So you have this triplet, and again in bar 83. But here, everything's tripleted. So just make sure, and it occurs later on as well, which we'll do in another segment. But just make sure that the triplets are where the triplets should be, and the quavers are where the quavers should be. Because that one got me out, and when I was listening to a version of it, I thought, I'm not doing that correctly. And it's really easy to do as well, because the 3 is kind of concealed under performance dynamics as well, so it's really easy to miss that. Okay, so just make sure, because the passages here are very similar, so just make sure that you play it differently each time and you express a different kind of colour and emotion each time. So if I can just quickly demonstrate, for instance, 2 or 3 of them. So you're just making sure that the passage work flows and is consistent to the emotion of the piece as well. So don't just brush through that, because that really is a beautiful section. It's one of my favourite places, the whole piece, even though it's technically simple. Emotionally it's very difficult to kind of express. So by the time we get up to 89, we have what I've written as unbelievable warmth. My score is just littered with very obscure words, which isn't helpful to anyone else but me. So 89, we have this. Okay, now we come from E flat to G minor. So this is a really significant harmonic change. It's a different mood altogether. It's kind of more tinged with sadness than it had before. The E flat section, this had a kind of hopeful aspect to it, whereas the G minor section is kind of a sigh, a sigh of sadness sort of thing. Sempre again, so just consistently, don't kind of move from there. And it's littered throughout a diminuendo and a rallentando, so you're really coming to the end of this section before you get to the a tempo section at bar 894. Okay, so as we get to the end of bar 92 into 93, what I kind of like to do on this flourish, where we have the I kind of like to go up to the F and climb down and cascade down in the dynamics. So what I do in my recording, I really emphasise and stress those bits, because I think it's really nice just to descend. It's kind of like the quiet before the storm, because we come back after a tempo into this, and then we come back with like the original theme. Just in a different key. We start on E7 to A minor instead of the original key. Okay, so this section is kind of just the same almost as the explanation I gave, the exposition I gave on the first segment that we went through last week. It's kind of the same idea here, it's just using different techniques, making sure that different bits are dynamically shaded different so they complement each other. So both hands together, for instance, let's just give this a quick whirl. So really coming off onto these slurs, so really going for it. And again, we have this kind of idea of slurs, not necessarily having to fall to be a slur. It can go, slur upwards. Okay, and again, don't make these stick out too much, as we discussed on the first segment. It all has to be consistent to the romantic movement, and obviously Chopin wanted pedal through here. He's written pedal marks on some of these bars and then left us to our own devices, as usually happens. So let's go from the tempo bar and just have a play through there. So again, coming off on these at the end of kind of the massive phrase, the phrase, the meta-narrative sort of thing, really kind of take your time over these bits. You can use rubato on those sections, so this D minor chord. You can use rubato on there before you go on to the... and it moves on. And this is kind of just a question. It's kind of wandering around the original theme, just searching for new direction. At least that's the way I see it anyway. And then we come to this A minor chord. And we get kind of a climax, and it goes back down to pianissimo. So again, una corda maybe for this section, and then back to the forte. Slur these. They should, in my opinion, should be slurred across. So the G sharp to the F sharp, and just making the dramatic tension, because obviously at this point at bar 100, it's starting to gravitate towards another theme, or at least a theme that's repeated. So let's just go from bar 100 and explain this even further. So bar 100. In E major again, in A major we arrive on an E7 chord, and this is just a bigger version of what we had before. So we had this kind of sotto voce under the surface, under the voice, and now it's really bringing that out in these massive chords. It's bringing out the same theme. We have fortissimo here, so we're really kind of starting to develop the theme at this point. So what we'll do, we'll leave it here, we'll take it again on segment 3. and start at bar 106 and take it on through this development section where we kind of have all hell break loose. Cool, okay, so we've covered a lot of ground there. So I'll see you on segment 3.